How do you build emergency grant and loan programs for small businesses during a pandemic? What does it take to get government, business, and nonprofit leaders on the same page to fund those initiatives? Welcome to the Ad-Libber podcast, featuring conversations of influence, some of it planned, much of it ad-libbed.
Thank you for tuning into the Ad-Libber. I'm Jay Scott. Co-hosting with me today is Rick Holberg, Gavin's Vice President of Creative Strategy and Branding. Our guest today is Dan Betancourt, President and CEO of Community First Fund, a Lancaster-based community development financial institution. Dan, thanks for joining us today on the Ad-Libber.
Hello, Jay.
Today we're going to discuss community partnerships during COVID-19, and we're going to also talk about some of the other work that Community First Fund does in the central Pennsylvania Lehigh Valley region.
So Dan, you and I have been working together for actually a couple of years now from a variety of different communications and marketing initiatives. And I have to admit, from the stories I've been hearing about Community First Fund, I have never seen you so focused and driven over the last couple of weeks. Community First Fund has established several local community emergency funds, and these are intended to support the small businesses that were not able to obtain federal relief during the pandemic. So can you share with us how Community First Fund was actually able to accomplish creating all these different funds?
Well, that focus that you have seen, Rick, maybe something in COVID activates something in me. And I think it's done it to our staff because we see the economic impact on small business owners. And I think historically we have been counter-cyclical to the economy. That is to say, when the economy goes bad is when community lending organizations like mine really get active because in many respects the banks tighten up their credit. And so we try to figure out how we can activate our credit and provide the capital to small business owners. And in this particular case, I have evolved. I mean, we have traditionally lent money to businesses, but what I realized in COVID, because the damage is so great, like a major depression, that we have figured out how to raise money and grants to get out to small businesses. That would have been unheard of, unprecedented for my organization, because we're trying to raise grants anyway to grow our organization. Now we're raising grants for businesses, and I think the government has realized and philanthropy has realized that it makes no sense to finance losses. It only makes sense to provide grants or forgivable grants to small business owners.
Dan, the COVID-19 pandemic has had widespread impacts. You've created these emergency funds in cities. Your organization has also coordinated more than 500 PPP loans at the federal level, and you've organized the state small business grant program. It's a lot of coordination on your half. What are some of the key ingredients to get local and state officials to have those conversations and bring these programs to fruition?
Well, one was just preparing for some event that you didn't know existed. That is to say, Community First Fund actually rounded out its executive suite, right? We had 3 members of our executive suite, and then we expanded to 5. And what that really did was it allowed me and our chief strategy officer to go out and really R&D and build things in a quick emergency. And so what I didn't know a year ago when we were growing our organization and building the infrastructure, that would actually help us in COVID. And so that was number one thing was our capacity. As far as the conversations, I really relied on deep relationships that we had across South Central Pennsylvania. And people, I think it really activated, I said I was activated, but activated the goodness in us. The goodness in government officials, the goodness in economic development professionals, and others, that if they had resources at their disposal, and you offered up a plan that made sense on how to get to, in our case, small mom and pop businesses, that you were immediately on the same page, and it was like you were on the same team. I didn't feel like we were on opposing teams. And so that's how we did that. And then, of course, what we learned in one community, this is something that Community First Fund has always done. It's always been a best practice organization in the sense that what we learn or apply in one place, we can take it to other towns and help them build their capacity. And so we started with our hometown in Lancaster, but we saw what Philadelphia did. They were the earliest emergency fund that came out. And I sort of copied that program and called the local mayor and the local foundations and said, hey, we want to raise $1 million and want to give a grant out to small businesses. And their first question is, how long is this going to be? And are you going to need more money and all this stuff? And quite frankly, I couldn't answer that. But I think by faith faith in my organization, Community First Fund, that we always deliver. We've always found ways to deliver and not overpromise. Actually, quite the opposite. That they were able to put the leap out there and take that first step. And then it was just literally calling these other towns that we had deep relationships with. I mean, for example, Reading, as one example, Reading, Pennsylvania has the former Secretary of State as its city manager, Pedro Cortez. It was just one literally 5-minute conversation with Pedro. And I said, Pedro, look what we did in Lancaster. We went through the same thing in Reading. And I was very familiar with the pots of money they have, CDBG funds, monies that were coming in because I was paying attention to federal stimulus, COVID money, etc. So I was able to literally conceptually to share an idea with him, and it became the mayor's signature program thereafter. And again, same thing in New York, and then same thing in Lebanon, talking to the mayors and just activating these emergency funds. But of course, that led to something bigger. It led to the idea of why don't we do this statewide? And I don't want to get into that. I'll let you set that up yourself. But we sort of saw this problem that need was going to be there statewide.
Right. I mean, you mentioned, that the statewide program. I mean, that's been a more recent initiative, certainly, as you've branched out from the city work. And it takes a little bit more coordination, I know, for that to happen, because there are a lot more folks involved at the state level that want to see your plan. They want to know how quickly can we deploy the money that is needed to the businesses that, didn't maybe get other types of support. Can you talk briefly about that, like how that process is communicated, and how much of a lead does your organization need to take in that respect, or is it really driven more by others and you're working in tandem with them in a different capacity?
Well, we had a network of CDFIs across the state, and that's community development loan funds, and we serve very similar like banks. We have our own capital, but we're very mission based. We're primarily lending in communities that have disadvantages, whether it's low-income people or maybe historic populations like people of color, among other things. And so we really focus in on those communities. And so in this region, it's Lancaster, Harrisburg, Reading, and York, and we go as far as Philadelphia and Lehigh Valley. And so of course, we had this network in place. And because of what we Community First learned in these emergency funds, we started pitching the ideas to our colleagues. Let's go to the legislature. Because what I understood then is that Pennsylvania got $4 billion in federal stimulus money that they were sitting on. And so we asked for $250 million to provide grants to mom and pop businesses across Pennsylvania. And it kind of went viral. And I didn't know at the time why it was so well received. I now know the reason for that. The state did not know how to get to small mom and pop businesses. It put out $61 million in a PETA fund through PETA, and that money went in 3 days, $61 million in 3 days, and it didn't get to the small businesses. And it was first come, first served basis. So that meant if you had a controller or an accountant that can respond, you got funded. And so I think the state legislature saw there was an inequity going on in Pennsylvania. And by the way, this was pre what's happening on the streets of Floyd. I mean, they clearly saw that small business owners and real small business owners, retail, client-facing businesses were just never going to be able to reopen. So that was factor number one. Factor number two, what I didn't understand then, was that the governor had been sitting on this $4 billion for about 5-6 weeks when we walked in, and we were talking to the appropriation chairs of the 4 caucuses, and they were very upset at the governor that there was no plan to get capital and grants out to small businesses. So here we walk in under those two circumstances, and we have this, $250 million proposal, and again, well received, and the governor agreed with it because they put it into the budget, meaning the legislature put it into the budget with 16 other organizations across the state.
So Dan, you guys have been doing this kind of great community work. Now, this is such an unusual circumstance with the pandemic that we're trying to adjust to. But for the last 25 plus years, Community First Fund has been doing this similar kind of community development work as a CDFI, Community Development Funding Institution. What exactly do CDFIs do, and how do you support the community? And can you give us some other examples outside of COVID? Because, like I said, 25 years pre-COVID, you're going to get back doing it again post-COVID too. So tell us exactly, what does a CDFI do?
We kind of see ourselves as mission-based lenders, of course, but also innovative or catalytic bankers. And so we certainly are, and it's interesting because I think when you talk to 10 different people, there's like 3 versions of Community First Fund. Some people think we only micro lending or small business lending to, let's say, communities of color or poor or low income communities. And that's actually true. We do that. And there's this other sector that thinks that maybe we only do large commercial transactions because we do very catalytic things in communities. And for example, in York, the entire first block of West Market Street, the old Woolworth building, the building there next to Cherry Lane where the Charred Barrel is, and then you wrap around where the old jewelry store is. I mean, that's about, I don't know, $20-30 million of redevelopment that we provide tax credits to the developer there, Josh Hankey. And we've done that in other towns. In Harrisburg, we helped with the startup in Midtown, Midtown Revitalization Zone, to start up a business co-working incubator and some affordable housing in a formerly shuttered Masonic building. And in Lancaster, the number one headache of every economic development professional was the Boulevard building. And that was a big monstrosity of a building that everyone drove past really fast because no one knew how to develop that. And we put in $10 million in tax credits. Now, I can go on, but the point there is, and Reading, similar things, the former Reading outlets, many of us know them when we grew up, were very vibrant, and we were able to redevelop the first one into commercial and housing building there with 70 units. But that is what banks used to do. They would take complex, very inefficient transactions, inefficient because it takes a long time, complex because you have to look for many capital sources. And so what Community First Fund learned over the years is our value was knowing where all these pots of money were, bringing them all together and starting as a lean institution. And what's interesting is, we're about a $100 million institution, but we punch way above our weight. We bring in the billion-dollar banks. This is something that they used to do, but now that they have merged and their headquarters are many states or counties over, they're not spending this kind of time in these small towns that we're in. This R&D time to figure out these complex community problems, and that's what Community First Fund has been able to do. So very few people know about the complex transaction part that we lead in. And I think the banks have become very comfortable. They probably were skeptical 10 years ago. Here's this organization, why are they leading this? I mean, we're way bigger. And I think now it's when we believe in a project, it's a brand now. And the bank said, oh, Community First Fund, because they know we can bring in, this catalytic capital sources from different areas and get these things done. So the third source of what people think we are, I think they think maybe we're an advocacy organization or some combination thereof. So I think it is the value that we bring in here is we tinker and we figure out community needs and we solve them.
I think one thing you brought up there that's very interesting to me, and I know it's been probably described by you to me in the past, is sort of those layers of funding is sort of like baking a cake, right? You identify all the different pieces and assemble it and make it work to, create this really cool redevelopment project that most people see, hey, we got a new coffee shop here. They see some new apartments. They see all the pieces at the back end. They don't really fully appreciate the communication and the teamwork that goes into assembling that unit of folks, right? It's tax credits, but it's a lot of other things that you also leverage. Can you talk about, communicating that process to the public now? Like, how is that different today compared to, say, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, before, you really got to the scale that you're at today?
I mean, I think that we still have a challenge branding in the sense that when we communicate large projects, I think a segment of the population thinks, well, that's all they do. And when we were really communicating the faces of our small business owners, they didn't understand that we can actually do the more complex projects. So I think it's targeting to the kind of people that are interested in that. So we will target our small business capacity directly to like business to small business owners, and the more complex things we use social media like let's just say LinkedIn and other things like that will really speak to the community leaders out there that need to understand some of the other complex things that we do.
So I know, Dan, that one of the things that I've been familiar with all along is that you've done a really good job at really trying to help underserved communities, women-owned businesses, minority businesses. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of trying to find those potential opportunities and what kind of things you can do for those folks?
This is where I think what is in the DNA of Community First Fund. At our core, we see ourselves as a civil rights organization. You probably will never meet a bank that will say those words. Our founders were really trying to figure out, how do you build wealth in poor communities? And so, one way is capital. You provide capital in a non-discriminatory way, and you can release the power that's within these poor communities. Actually, one of the things that I find entrepreneurs, when we help them, they thank us. Hey, thank you for providing this loan. And what I believe is, actually, we should be thanking them. They come to us, they're very serious entrepreneurs. They come to us with business plans, with lots of experience, plumbing, electricity, a pizza shop, cutting hair. These are serious business owners. And all we're doing is removing all the barriers that they have, real or perceived, and help them grow or expand their business. So, that is to say that, that runs so deep to us. And so it gets to the point where on the 222 corridor, from Lancaster all the way through Reading and Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton, we have become the banker of choice for Latino and African American businesses. That is to say, there are billion-dollar institutions that do not have more clients than us when it comes to people of color than a $100 million organization. So that's not a testament to my organization. I think that's a sad commentary on the inability for large financial institutions to reach these small mom and pop, particularly businesses owned by people of color.
There's more of would you say there's an opportunity then there for you guys to continue to expand and talk more about, other services that you can provide to those communities, be it really, you said punch above your weight class earlier. Certainly you can continue to do that moving forward and, show even greater support for those type of business owners, right?
Yes. And that's one of the things, as we've been able to grow, we've been able to offer. We've been able to actually just grow with them. Like when we were a smaller fund, we might say, oh, the largest loan we can do for you is $100,000. And I never thought that we should undercapitalize our clients. So I thought it was our mission to always be able to provide the resources. So we have steadily grown and kept ahead of our clients in terms of what their needs were. And so when a client, for example, either got a small business loan and they wanted to then buy the building that they were in because they were renting, we learned how to provide commercial loans. When a small grocer wanted to grow and then open up a supermarket, we were able to provide multi-million-dollar loans. And so we kind of figured out, as our clients were growing, we grew the organization not because we wanted to grow, but we wanted to be able to fulfill the needs and not have our clients either not get the capital they need or just stop their growth, quite frankly.
So in addition to all of these great things you're doing in the community, in addition to the emergency fund loans, the COVID pandemic things that you got going, you guys just recently also announced a merger with another CDFI, Finanta, in Philadelphia. So why now? Tell us about what does this merger mean for you, for Community First Fund, for the Philadelphia community?
Well, I thought that before COVID happened, that the biggest thing I was going to do this year was to integrate two in my industry, pretty nice sized organizations, and with combined assets, as I said, about $100 million. And so it turns out that was going to be a very minor thing, given that this, the other funds that we started and this $250 million fund across the state. But why now? Because we started that conversation a year ago, prior to COVID, and we had built up so much momentum, and it just made sense to just keep going. And the other why now is because what we learned here along the 222 corridor, and I include Harrisburg and York right to the left of that, we wanted to apply in the predominantly Latino community in Philly, and that's called the Kensington community. And by the way, I'm Puerto Rican, so I felt really at home there because it's predominantly Puerto Rican, of course, Dominican population there. And I knew what we learned along the 222 corridor, that is to lend to immigrant populations that we can apply in Philadelphia. And what I did not understand then is we would go into Philadelphia as one of the largest organizations of our kind and be able to do things that local organizations didn't have the capability. Most organizations of our type just kind of grow and they just kind of stop. Part of it is they become programs of large organizations. And what we have done is we looked at ourselves as an institution. And again, the earlier conversation I had with you was we knew that it was like this sense of urgency of growing because we wanted to grow with our clients. And so we go in with these vast array of tools into Philadelphia and already have had a major impact on eastern North Philadelphia. That's the northeast quadrant of Philadelphia. And now we have plans to go citywide. One
thing that jumps out at me is as you get into a region like that, you're already serving there, but the fact that you're covering a bigger footprint, there's probably some gaps, probably some areas that aren't fully aware of Community First. Maybe they're not as familiar with Finanta either. How do you create that awareness? Like, what steps do you feel you need to take over the coming months, or maybe over the next year or so, to really engage stronger with those communities and continue to grow and fulfill the mission of this organization?
Well, I think part of it is, we'll never have a branch system like a bank. We're not going to have 100 offices serving, the 15 counties in southeast and south central Pennsylvania that we serve. But it's just word of mouth with our clients, and then doing really good work that our economic development partners just to, promote the heck out of us. And so we have lent more historically than the prior year. We only know growth. I think Rick knows that. He's been working with us. And so part of this is organic, but part of it is when we go into a new market, there's a whole new set of customers that we can market to. And actually the Finanta merger, I think, advanced our work by 10 years, because it would have taken us many years to build goodwill and to become known. And you have an organization that's known for 30 years. And so we immediately get all that goodwill and are able to go very deep into a neighborhood that would have taken us many years to penetrate.
I think that's a good kind of way to summarize. You guys have continued to grow and grow and grow, and this is obviously another step in that journey, in that process for Community First Fund. We appreciate you coming on the Ad Libber to talk about it and talk about what's ahead for Community First Fund. So thanks, Dan, for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Ad Libber podcast. To find new episodes and get more content from our team here at Gavin, make sure to visit our website at adlibberpodcast.com. The Ad Libber is also available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.